watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. One of the most audacious attacks in recent times on Saudi oil facilities have rocked the Indian markets that saw big losses today, as well as kept the world on edge. Now, there's been no major move yet in the last 24 hours. The Saudis have invited global experts to evaluate the damage to their oil field. Assurances have been given that supplies will be restored quickly, and this has caused crude prices to slip off its highs. And despite the panic selling in the last tree today, India's supplies are unlikely to be disrupted in the foreseeable future. So, is the worst over, or is this the calm before the storm? To speak more on this, I am joined today by Talmiz Ahmed, former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman and UAE, Amit Bhandari, a fellow energy and environmental study program at Gateway House. I'm also speaking today with Ryan Patel, senior fellow at Drucker School of Management. Welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us. Ryan, let me begin by welcoming you to the show and getting your take on what we're expected to see. I must say, the Saudis have looked at things very calmly. They've still not pointed fingers at who the possible culprits could be. Their statement says that, we're very capable of dealing with the perpetrators of this attack, asks the world to back them. Do you see this level of calmness continuing? Where do you foresee this entire thing going? Will it possibly flare into a bigger conflict in the Middle East?
Well, thanks for having me. And, I think they're going to keep the calm rhetoric. That doesn't mean their action won't be calm. I think they were in a situation where they have some oil shortage, as you mentioned, that the short-term impact here of the drone attack has been obviously going to be very calculated, but the long-term looks like it's over. But when you talk about the geopolitical risk that is happening in the MENA region, this is not over by a long shot. There is so many complexities with Saudi, obviously with Iran, and obviously I think what they're looking for is for noise from the outside of the MENA region, maybe from the US and the UK and other countries to stay at bay. They want to kind of handle the situations themselves. They've always have kind of done that, where they want to be able to handle their own without any interference. And I think that's pretty strong rhetoric from a country that just got hit with something we've never seen before in the history of the oil flow, that they actually got hit. That's kind of, not I want to say embarrassing, but obviously something that they're not happy about. And for them to be that calm really kind of shows what's going to happen next. Is all eyes will be on Saudi.
And Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, you know the region well. What is your reading on how the Saudis have been responding? We know that President Rouhani of Iran will be at the United Nations General Assembly in a couple of weeks from now. World leaders will be there. Shinzo Abe saying he will meet him. He's not responding right now. Do you think the focus for the Saudis right now is just getting their supplies back on track, and that's where they're going to put all their efforts and energy?
Yes, I think that is self-evident. They have to get the situation under control, and they have to reassure the world markets. But that is not the main point just now. The main point is about the political situation. There is an ongoing confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran that has been going on now for 8 years. And since Trump became president, it has escalated. There has been a desperate scenario now where there could be a confrontation that would turn into a conflagration. After the departure of John Bolton, there was a short period of about 3 or 4 days when there was a feeling that there might be some degree of conciliation between the US president and the Iranians. But that has now been put to rest. After this attack, the president has gone back to his belligerent mode, and I believe that he has spoken about being ready for an assault. At the moment, there is no clear proof. As I speak to you now, I have studied all the literature on the subject, and there is a lack of clarity. There is a lot of misinformation as well, but there is a lack of clarity as to where the weapons came from, what was the nature of the weapon, and who pulled the trigger. I think there is a lot of uncertainty in this regard, and we should look seriously at the Houthis instead of pointing fingers at the Iranians so peremptorily.
Really, that's a very interesting point, Ambassador Ahmed, because so far, a lot of the commentary coming out has been that the Houthis are not capable of launching an attack of this size and scale. It's no one seems to believe their version or their claim at all. That's an interesting counter view coming. I wonder what the others on the panel think. Let me just get some views in on this. Ryan, do you want to comment on the point of how the Houthis really fit in? And because literally nobody is giving credence to their claim, and once people do that, then the next steps would possibly follow. Right now, all eyes of suspicion on Iran.
Well, what the ambassador had said is, Trump's rhetoric hasn't been as strong as it used to, as he usually would be. He just was kind of soft for his own tone when it comes to what's next. And, that tells you something. Listen, wars of any kind is not good for any country per se. And I think in this case, where the economy is so delicate right now, especially I hate to tie it back to the U.S. with their kind of in their own quarter four going into this, and oil prices tied to their consumer goods as well it is to other global markets. You have to be really sure with evidence and clear cut to be able to make a move like this. This is not the time to be able to do that. And to me, it's very interesting to see the rhetoric. To me, I just read kind of what the leaders are saying and what the action steps, and the fact that there isn't any strong action just yet, which tells me that there's a little bit more going on than maybe we meet the eye.
Okay, interesting. Amit Bhandari, in the middle of all of these conspiracy theories, which of course happen when there is a paucity of actual information. Right. Right now, what we know for sure is the Saudis have sort of said, let this team of global experts come and see what's happened. Yes. Meanwhile, there are reports of extensive damage which could take months to fix. Right. Yet they are pretty sure that their supplies will be fine in a couple of weeks. What is your read on the situation and the information coming out?
So, two or three things. One is that based on my experience, oil and gas installations usually have plenty of redundancy built into them. One example I can give is of Bombay High. In 2005, there was a big disaster. A major platform was destroyed. Yeah. But within a few weeks, ONGC was able to reroute production through other platforms and get almost 80% production back within a few weeks' time. So we can be reasonably certain that the Aramco facility has more redundancy built into it, given its sheer importance to the company and to the country. So once the fires have been put out and some damage assessment is done, I'm reasonably certain that some production can start recovering immediately. Importantly, the facility which has been damaged is actually an oil processing plant. It is not the oil production field. So this plant just purifies the oil with natural gas and water, and so that it can be sent out to customers. So the oil production is still intact. So as this plant recovers, the oil production can restart. So the damage is not going to be 5.7 million barrels for the entire duration.
Okay. So that's interesting. Yes. Now, just let's tell you why the world is so jittery about what has happened. Apart from the fact that this is a completely audacious attack, I just want to play out some graphics for our viewers, and this chart that we've put together on who the biggest crude exporters in the world are. And of course, this is the world's biggest oil importers. I'm talking about exporters, and Saudi Arabia tops that list, which is why when half their supply gets hit, the world does get jittery. So we'll have to wait and watch how quickly that is put into place. I want to come to you on the Indian perspective, Amit. And in this case, so far, Dharmendra Pradhan today says that we will look maybe towards Russia, yes, increasing our imports from Russia. We already take a lot of oil from Iran. They're the third largest exporters to India. Yes. Looking at the situation, do you think that is the best bet? What can India do?
Well, actually, in the current case, the biggest impact on India is going to be, I believe there won't be any physical shortage of oil at all, at least if things stay where they are right now. So if there is not going to be a physical shortage of oil, how are we affected? The big impact for us could be that the price of oil that we import, all of the oil, not just the oil from Saudi Arabia, is going to go up. It has already gone up $6 or $7 a barrel. So we are looking at an extra $10 to $12 billion going out of the Indian economy. As long as we are willing to pay that price, this is, the event will not impact us. The problem is that we have not hedged ourselves adequately in the past by investing in foreign oil fields and by using financial instruments, put and call options, which can actually protect us against these eventualities. So our recommendation would be that once this particular disruption is over, then try to hedge yourself better, because we can be assured that these disruptions are going to happen again.
And you know, we were just showing the chart of the biggest oil producers, not exporters, mind you, the producers in the world, and the United States is topping that list because there's been a plan in place which has brought them to this situation of self-sufficiency.
That's right.
I just want to come back to you know, a point that Ambassador Talmiz had made a little while earlier, which is that let's wait and watch and see what happens. Ambassador, you say that the Houthis could very well be responsible, Iran won't be, but Iran is anyway in a sticky situation. There is pressure from the United States. If you look at what Angela Merkel has said, where she's talking about going back to a previous regime where you know, Iran needed to de-escalate its militarization. Do you think that this is going to be irrelevant in the long term? But who's actually done this? Before we actually find out officially who's done this, we're going to get into a situation where the rhetoric will increase. Is that something you're afraid might happen?
You know, there is a lot of things happening at the same time, simultaneously. We have issues relating to the supply of oil. We have issues relating to supply in the short term and in the medium term. Short term, I think we will be able to manage. Over the longer term, there could be serious difficulties because we do not really know about the extent of the damage to the Saudi facilities. That will take some time to be clarified. But the more important issue is the political scenario. And that is what is the source of the deepest concern to the international community. It is the United States that unilaterally withdrew from the nuclear agreement and has imposed the severest possible sanctions on Iran at a time when Iran was fulfilling all its obligations. At that time, the President of the United States had been told that this policy of maximum pressure will get Iran to the negotiating table. That has not happened, and it's not likely to happen, and everyone told him that it won't happen. He had these extreme right-wing advisors around him in the shape of Bolton and Pompeo and a few others outside the administration, particularly those who are extremely supportive of Israel. These are the ones who have been advising him, saying that this is the way to get the Iranians on board, and it hasn't worked. Instead, the scenario has become extremely tense. What the Iranians have been saying is correct, that you must go back to the nuclear agreement, you must reinstate the scenario, you must then relax all these sanctions that you have imposed, and then we will sit with you and talk to you.
Okay, Ryan, I want you to come in here because we are going to have, the United Nations General Assembly in a couple of weeks. Trump earlier indicated that he might speak to President Rouhani, then that he wouldn't. Now, in the backdrop of all of this, are all eyes on what happens in New York in the next couple of weeks? Does that become extremely crucial?
Absolutely. I mean, every year it seems like we're putting eyes what actually, who says what, and obviously with President Trump, his visits to all these kind of summits, especially the UN, is on pause because it really leads to, is he being nice? Is he not being nice? Is that going to lead to foreign conversations? Is he saying one thing? Is he doing another thing? We've seen this multiple times. So the rhetoric from his meeting and what he says is actually going to curtail maybe what hopefully foreshadows. It doesn't always happen, but the markets and the global community reacts to those types of meetings. And so I think if you see a very positive meeting from that UNGA, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be a deal, but maybe it'll cool down tensions. And we've seen this in this rhetoric between US and China, US and the EU, anything in that kind of rhetoric and those kind of meetings are really, really important. And now they didn't have a meeting. Obviously, I would think that's a lost opportunity. And I think that's something that the international community and the global community is something that I would hope that they would come together.
Okay. Amit, let me talk a bit to you now about the Indian impact and how we see that unfolding. Well, the good news, at least tonight, is that crude has slipped off its highs. And we'll wait and see how that pans out all day through tomorrow. Reassuring voices coming in from the government. But most analysis also seems to agree that India is particularly vulnerable.
Yes.
Do you think that's a fair reading? and how can we now hedge our bets?
So the first part is absolutely correct. We import 85% of all the oil that we use, and that number is not going to come down.
Yeah.
So we import 1.4 billion barrels a year, and if the price of oil goes up $10, $14 billion out of the Indian economy, that won't change. So what can we do about it? Two options. First, we need to start investing more aggressively in foreign oil and gas fields, and not invest in the kind of assets we have so far pursued in places like Sudan, Venezuela, or Syria, but actually invest in shale oil and oil sands of Canada and the US. These are the geopolitically most stable places that you will find anywhere in the world. If the price of oil, God forbid, goes to $100 or $120 a barrel, these assets are going to protect you from any downside.
Where do you see the price of oil going right now? Or is it too early? Is it on a crystal ball gazing right now?
Price of oil is one thing we never try to forecast.
Yeah.
That is a mug's game. But having said that, if nothing else happens, I mean, and we expect that some recovery of production will start within a week.
Yeah.
We think that within we have really seen the worst of it, and in 5 to 6 months we should see actually things coming back to normal. This is the reading we have based on the spot and the future market prices. In the long run, you can expect a $2 or $3 barrel premium that is going to be added to the crude price, which is the risk premium because of the added geopolitical risk.
Yeah, and we've already seen that in retail prices today in India.
Yes.
So we might see that impact even more. So if I understand this correctly, let me come to you, Ryan. All of this hinges on good sense prevailing and nobody, pulling the trigger, so to speak, or acting in haste. And Saudi will take its time, get its production back, and all will be well. That's what we hope that happens. Looks sounds too good to be true.
When you say it that way, that doesn't really convince me. On that's what's going to happen. I think.
Yeah.
I think what you learn from this, I think we're going to see more. I mean, geopolitical risk has a percentage now,
Yeah.
right? Has a percentage that most businesses and countries have to take in effect. And we live in a world now where if you don't have these kind of plans, don't have these kind of relations, it is impactful. And I think the rhetoric now, or to your point, is that maybe rationale and people come together and make sense. And I do believe that would be the case, but I wish it was that simple, right? There's too many trade relations, too many relations to other countries to be involved in something to keep it very simple. And so you would hope that this will be a group effort. And, like I said, at the end of the day, who really gets affected are the citizens,
Yeah.
the consumers,
Okay.
when things like this happen.
No, let's break that down a little, Ryan, and I'm coming back to you. Let's look at how the USA could now really respond in ways going forward. So very early on, the Americans have said that they think Iran has done it. Okay, so Saudi has not yet gone ahead and pointed fingers. We'll have to wait and see what this group of experts, I presume, are the ones who will have some kind of say, or which investigations will bring some clarity on who is responsible. Do you think that the Americans are now toning down all the rhetoric that we saw on day one?
I think the U.S. has gotten to a realization that, here in the U.S. political base, and especially Donald Trump's political base, that there's so many other issues that is on his thing, that this is
Yeah.
probably not one of the things that he wants to go out and attack, unless he has the justification to join a country or two to be able to do this. I don't think this is something that is solely going to be on his plate just because he's about to be up for re-election in 2020, and he's got other things that he has to run on campaign-wise if he wants to be re-elected. So as you mentioned, the rhetoric was really hot about Iran last year. Obviously, time has changed on what has been his political party's attribute. So I think you're seeing. I think he's going to be in the waiting mode, see, and then do whatever force that he thinks that needs to be said with the Saudis.
Yeah, so you're right. Donald Trump right now has larger fish to fry. He's politically engaged in, his domestic situation. So that's an interesting way to look at it. Ambassador Talmiz, you put it very well when you talked about, the long-standing strife between Saudi Arabia and Iran. What are the options that you see Saudi Arabia now looking at, and the scenarios that could play out over the next few weeks?
Firstly, their dispute is not long-standing. It's only 8 years old. After the Iran-Iraq war, they had built up good working relationships,
Yeah.
and they had reasonably good ties. They work together on a number of issues. Since the Arab Spring, there have been disputes. These are largely because of concerns that Saudi Arabia itself has about the increasing power and the influence of Iran. I think what we have not discussed so far,
Yes.
and that should be a priority, is the near total absence of a peace process in the region. 8 years of conflict, more than 500,000 people dead, cities devastated, not a single peace process has emerged. Instead of discussing what we should do in terms of short-term palliative, we should be discussing what India can do in terms of promoting security in the region. This region is extremely important to us. We have 8 million people living there. We get 80% of our oil from there, and we do nothing at all. We can't get oil from other places. It's not enough. And the prices, of course, are the same. Also, we must recall, and I want to give this clarification to your panel, getting assets abroad is a commercial venture, not a strategic venture. If there are serious shortages of energy supplies, no country will allow its produce to go to other countries. So that is a commercial venture, and it's a good thing. But we should not imagine that it will save us if there is a conflagration in the region. What we should be working on now, and the Prime Minister has been to the region 10 times in the last 5 years, we should be doing something about it. And I don't hear anything from New Delhi on this subject.
No, you have an important point there, Ambassador, because our outlook has been to wait and watch. We talk about the Middle East sometimes in the context of, energy security, or the fact that we have so many, citizens or Indian origin people in the region. But we stay away. We've managed to keep that very fine balance, which is why today when the Minister of External Affairs talks about, our relationship with Iran, and we have these competing pressures from the United States, we've sort of tread that middle ground. Why should we want to change that?
I think you're talking about something quite different. A so-called middle ground works when there is a scenario of peace and stability.
Yeah.
What happens when there is a scenario of conflict, confrontation, and conflagration? Those kinds of balancing, bilateral, transactional arrangements will not work if the whole region goes up in flames. There will be no policy to pursue that. You will have a region that is rich in oil, that has most of the world's reserves, and is a source of enormous energy security for us. It will go up in flames. So we should be doing something more serious. The Western countries have either caused the problem or are incapable of addressing it. It is Asian countries like India, China, Japan, and Korea who should be doing something about it. So this policy of balance, that is an outdated policy and does not serve present day situations at all.
Okay, very interesting perspective. Amit, you want to come in on some of those observations that Ambassador Ahmed has made?
Well, on the issue of diplomacy, I mean, he is the expert, so it would not really behoove us to get into that. The other part is that, when we talk about oil, oil and money are both fungible. We don't need to physically get oil from the US or Brazil or anywhere else into India. As long as we have the money for it, we can pay for it from any other source as well. So the idea is that, how does India get affected when the price goes up, when it goes to 75, 80, 100 or 120? It's money.
But you are talking about very long-term solutions, aren't you?
The question is, what is it that is entirely within our control? What is it that we are capable of doing? Financial actions and investments are actions that are completely within our control. It is within our capability, and it is a clearly mapped out path that we can see and act upon now with a plan in mind. What Ambassador has suggested is definitely a good idea, but this is not something which we can easily say that these are the three things we should do. This is how it would play out. So, which is why I would not really venture in that area.
Okay, Ryan, I don't know if you have a view on geopolitically what positions now should be taken and will be taken. India, of course, has had, and I think that's a nice and apt description that Ambassador talked about, a transactional approach to individual nations within, the larger Middle East, and what works for us. In a situation like that, do you think that fine balancing act will be difficult to really sustain?
Well, I mean, I'm actually along the lines with kind of what you had said. Every country, let's just be honest, acts for the best for themselves, right? If you take that as a premise right now, economically, right, they will be economically driven to go into certain relations to keep that balance or not. If it's going to hurt itself, then India specifically, then won't do it. But if they're just like many other countries, not just India, right? There's the UK and the EU and the US specifically, and other countries in Asia like China. They're making moves based on their best interest at this point, especially over the last 2-3 years. You've seen the rhetoric pull back down of this protectionism, especially from the U.S., where they're only going to do things that is best for them, and that would lead to policy. And so, if you keep that in mind, it does have other countries are jumping in the fray in the middle of this. It actually makes them think twice, right? Maybe 10 years ago, it was a different story. Why the importance of the UN and these kind of organizations to kind of create that rhetoric and to create countries to come together and have that balanced talk. I think for India specifically, they are in that kind of middle balance. What do you do? Like, if you take one step on one side or you take another step, you're going to upset somebody on either side, and then it detrimentally impact you. So they're not, like I said, I think at the end of the day, India has their own things that they're working on, especially on the economic viewpoints and what they need to do to be stronger in the region. I think stability for every country. I think let's talk about the Middle East.
Yeah.
Every country in the world has a vested interest to make sure there is peace. Let's just be honest. Now, how you achieve that in a way that's in a peaceful manner without hurting
absolutely.
everybody.
But Ryan, I'm just going to come in there and make a point. Obviously, no one wants war. No one wants this situation to escalate. Everyone wants peace. But can the Saudis really let this go unpunished or without any response?
No, they're going to have there's going to be a response.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a huge attack like this on on one of their biggest oil fields, there's going to be a message be given. No matter, we don't know what kind of message they're going to give, but they're going to give a message to those who did this to make sure it doesn't happen again.
All right. So it's wait and watch. It's wait and watch for now, and let's hope that the world comes together to really make sure that a response is given, because this is a terror strike at the end of the day, and must be responded to, but not in a way which derails the world economy, which is already in a pretty fragile space. So that's why all eyes on the UNGA in the next couple of weeks in New York. I want to thank all of you for joining us on debate number 1 on the India development debate. We'll take a very short break over here, but when we come back, all of this talk about economic stress and the slowdown, is it giving you the blues? Is it getting you down? Well, you're not the only one. There are reports that there's been a 3-fold hike in those reporting anxiety, stress, and even mental depression, all because of the slowdown in the economy. We're coming back with that special debate right after this.